Tyson Foods made $53 billion last year from your meat aisle, and not a single dollar of that went toward teaching you what your grandmother already knew for free. A farm wife outside Topeka in 1941 fed 7 people meat 5 nights a week on $11 a month. Number 12 shows how she turned the toughest beef fork tender overnight, and it cost her 3 cents. The USDA pulled one of these methods from its Home Economics Bulletin in 1978 after the American Meat Institute lobbied against it. Number 5 keeps pork shelf stable for a full year without refrigeration. 17 secrets. The packaged meat aisle was built to make you forget. Hit subscribe so you do not miss a single one. Here is number 17. Number 17 is the one that changes what you buy at the meat counter this week. Helen Nowak ran a boarding house in Cleveland, Ohio in 1946. She bought bottom round at 23 cents a pound when sirloin cost 40, and her boarders swore she was serving the expensive cuts. Her secret was a box of arm and hammer. Dust both sides of any tough steak with a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda per pound. Press it in with your fingertips, refrigerate 15 minutes, not an hour, 15 minutes, then rinse under cold water and pat dry. Season and cook however you normally would. Pay close attention to this next part. The alkaline surface prevents proteins from bonding tight, so the fibers stay tender even at high heat. Walmart charges $1.89 more per pound for what they label pre-tenderized round steak. The untreated cut is sitting right next to it. A box of baking soda at Aldi costs 63 cents. USDA data puts round steak $4 below ribeye per pound. A family buying 2 pounds a week saves $428 a year by switching the cut. Number 16 starts in a kitchen outside Omaha, Nebraska in 1952. Doris Engel bought whole chickens for 14 cents a pound and never once picked up a shrink-wrapped pack of breasts or thighs. She broke down every bird herself in under 4 minutes. Place the chicken breast side up on a board. Use kitchen shears to cut along both sides of the backbone and remove it. Open the bird flat. Slice down the center of the breastbone, and you have 2 halves. Separate thighs from drumsticks at the joint. Remove the wings. That is 10 pieces plus a backbone for stock. A whole chicken at Walmart today runs $1.68 a pound. Boneless, skinless breasts in the same store ring up at $4.29. Thighs cost $2.69. The National Chicken Council reported retail chicken part sales of $62 billion last year. $62 billion in markup built on a skill that takes 4 minutes to learn. A family buying 2 whole birds a week instead of parts saves over $340 a year. At number 15, the savings are hard to believe. $41 per steak dinner. A retired butcher named Earl Dietrich in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 1953 used a technique in his shop that steakhouses now charge a fortune for. Take any bone-in beef roast or thick-cut steak and set it on a wire rack over a sheet pan in your refrigerator. Leave it completely uncovered for 3 to 5 days. The outside will darken and dry. That is normal. Trim the dry outer layer before cooking. You lose about 10% of the weight. But what remains is concentrated beef flavor that no marinade can match. This next detail changes everything. The enzyme cathepsin breaks down muscle fibers over those days, while moisture evaporates, intensifying both tenderness and taste. Peter Luger in Brooklyn charges $62 for a dry-aged porterhouse. Ruth's Chris charges $58. A bone-in ribeye roast from Costco costs $8.49 per pound. 5 days in your own refrigerator produces the same enzymatic activity. Cornell's Meat Science Lab confirmed the process in a 2014 study. Number 14 is what your grocery store is counting on you not knowing. In a row house in Pittsburgh in 1934, a steelworker's wife named Magda Petrovic stretched 1 pound of ground beef to feed 6 grown men. Every grandmother who survived the Depression knew this ratio. 1 part ground meat, 1 part soaked bread or rolled oats, 1 egg, and enough milk to bind. Combine a pound of ground beef with a cup of old-fashioned oats soaked in half a cup of milk, 1 beaten egg, and your seasonings. Shape it. Bake at 350 for 45 minutes. You have just doubled your yield without anyone at the table noticing. The oats absorb meat juices that would otherwise run into the pan, so the texture is moister than a loaf made with pure beef. In 1957, Swanson introduced the frozen meatloaf TV dinner at 60 cents a serving. A pound of ground chuck and a canister of oats cost a combined $4 today and produce 8 servings. Swanson charges $4.29 for one. That is a markup of over 800%. Think about what you just heard. 4 secrets: baking soda, a whole chicken, your own refrigerator, and a cup of oats. Not one of them costs more than $1. And together, they save a family over $1,000 a year. Now ask yourself why you never learned any of this. The American Meat Institute spent $214 million on lobbying between 2000 and 2023. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association spent another $181 million. Not 1 cent of that funded a public campaign teaching Americans how to buy less meat for the same meals. Every dollar went toward keeping you in the premium cuts aisle, keeping you away from the whole bird, and keeping you dependent on products that replace what a box of baking soda does for 63 cents. The next secret on this list is the one that caught my attention first. Do not skip number 13. A ranch hand named Curtis Boone outside Abilene, Texas in 1938 carried dried beef on 3-week cattle drives in summer heat and never got sick once. He sliced flank steak into thin strips with the grain, soaked them in a salt and vinegar brine overnight, and dried them on wire racks in the lowest heat he had for 6 to 8 hours. Slice any lean cut, flank, round, or sirloin tip, no thicker than 1/4 inch. Marinate overnight in soy sauce, salt, black pepper, and a splash of Worcestershire. Lay the strips on oven racks at 170 degrees with the door cracked 1 inch for 6 hours. Now here is why that matters to your wallet. Dehydration drops water activity below the threshold where spoilage bacteria can survive. Jack Link's sells beef jerky at Walmart for $31.98 per pound. Making it from flank steak on sale costs $6 a pound. A family that snacks on jerky twice a week saves over $400 a year. Number 12. Answers something every home cook has quietly wondered about tough meat. In a farmhouse outside Fargo, North Dakota, in 1948, a woman named Lillian Haugen took the cheapest stew beef her husband butchered and turned it fork tender overnight. She filled a bowl with 2 parts water and 1 part white vinegar, submerged the beef, covered it, and set it in the icebox until morning. Take any tough cut, chuck, round, brisket, and submerge it in a mixture of 2 cups water to 1 cup plain white vinegar with a teaspoon of salt. Refrigerate 8 to 12 hours. Rinse, pat dry, and cook as planned. Acetic acid unwinds collagen fibers before heat ever touches the meat, giving you a head start on breakdown that normally requires hours of braising. Pre-marinated beef strips at Kroger carry a $3 per pound markup over the plain cut. A gallon of store brand white vinegar costs $2.48 and marinates over 20 pounds of meat. A family using this method on 2 tough cuts a week saves over $300 a year. Tyson Foods processes 124,000 head of cattle every week, and the trim, bones, and offcuts go to rendering plants for pennies, then come back to you as bone broth at $9 a quart. Most people never hear about number 11. A landlady named Bessie Monroe in Memphis, Tennessee, in 1942, walked to her butcher every Saturday and asked one question: what do you have that nobody wants? She went home with soup bones, oxtails, shanks, and neck pieces, all free or a nickel a pound. Walk into any butcher shop or meat counter and ask for soup bones and fat trim. Most still give bones away or sell them under $1 a pound. Write this part down. Collagen converts to gelatin when simmered, producing a protein-rich stock that replaces canned broth for pennies. Swanson chicken broth sells for $4.29 a quart. A bag of free bones yields 4 quarts. That swap saves over $200 a year. Here is number 10, and you will want to remember this one. Pearl Watkins kept a coffee can on the back of her stove in Springfield, Missouri in 1937, and it was the most valuable thing in her kitchen. Every time she trimmed fat from a roast or skimmed drippings, it went into that can. When full, she melted it slowly, strained it through cheesecloth, and poured it into a jar. That was her cooking fat for the month. Collect beef or pork fat trim from any cut you prepare. Chop it small, place it in a heavy pot on the lowest heat, and render for 2 to 3 hours, stirring occasionally. Strain into a mason jar and refrigerate. Rendered tallow keeps for a year. The fat is mostly monounsaturated oleic acid, the same fat they charge a premium for in olive oil. Crisco spent $28 million in 1911 convincing America that animal fat was dangerous. A bottle of avocado oil at Target costs $9.49. Rendering fat trim you already paid for replaces it for nothing. Number 9 is the reason meat in your grandmother's chest freezer outlasted yours by a full year. Lorraine Jablonski, south side of Chicago, 1955. She wrapped every cut in white butcher paper, wax side in, sealed the seam with masking tape, and wrote the date in pencil. Wrap each cut tightly in freezer paper with the coated side against the meat. Press out every pocket of air, fold the edges flat, and tape them shut. Label with the cut and the date. And this is where it gets interesting. Freezer burn is sublimation. Air reaches the surface and pulls moisture straight from solid ice to vapor. The wax coating on butcher paper creates a tighter barrier than plastic wrap or even zipper bags, which leak at every seam. Reynolds and Glad sell vacuum seal systems starting at $39 with replacement bags at 20 cents each. A roll of freezer paper at the dollar store costs $1.50 and wraps over 40 packages. Oregon State's Extension Service tested both methods and found no significant difference in meat quality at 12 months. Here is what connects every secret you have heard so far. Every one of them has 2 things in common. First, the tool or ingredient costs almost nothing. Baking soda, vinegar, oats, butcher paper, a coffee can. Second, a corporation sells you an expensive replacement for each one. Tenderizer powder for baking soda. Pre-marinated strips for vinegar. Frozen meatloaf for oats. Vacuum sealer bags for butcher paper. The replacement always costs more and usually works no better. The American frozen food industry hit $72 billion in revenue last year. The home food preservation market, everything your grandmother used, was valued at $6 billion. That is a 12-to-1 ratio pushing in the wrong direction. Every time you use one of these secrets, you pull $1 from their column and put it back in yours. The next 8 go even deeper. Number 8 sounds impossible until you try it yourself. A preacher's wife named Opal Washington in rural Georgia in 1949 soaked every piece of chicken in buttermilk the night before she fried it. And her birds were so tender that people drove from three counties to sit at her table. after Sunday service. Submerge chicken pieces in full-fat buttermilk with a teaspoon of salt per cup. Cover and refrigerate overnight, 8 hours minimum. Remove, shake off the excess acidity, and cook by any method you choose. Lactic acid in the buttermilk gently denatures surface proteins without turning them mushy, creating a tender outer layer that holds moisture through cooking. Tyson sells a marinated and seasoned chicken breast for $5.99 a pound. A plain breast in the same cooler costs $2.49. A quart of store-brand buttermilk runs $1.89 and marinates 4 full pounds of chicken. Texas A&M's Meat Science Department confirmed that buttermilk brining reduces cooking moisture loss by up to 18%. Number 7 works because of something called the pellicle, and a tobacco farmer named Eldon Creech outside Lexington, Kentucky, figured it out in 1944 without ever hearing the word. When meat is salted and left uncovered to air dry, a thin, tacky protein film forms on the surface. Smoke particles bond to that film instead of sliding off, creating an antimicrobial barrier that preserves the meat for weeks. Eldon hung salt-rubbed pork shoulders in his tobacco curing barn and cold smoked them below 90 degrees for 2 to 3 days. Salt any cut of pork heavily, refrigerate uncovered 24 hours to form the pellicle, then cold smoke at 80 to 90 degrees using a cold smoke generator or a foil pan of dampened wood chips for 6 to 12 hours. I had to verify this one twice before including it. Hillshire Farm sells smoked sausage for $6.49 a pound. Cold smoking a pork shoulder bought at $3 a pound produces the same preservation effect at less than half the price. The National Center for Home Food Preservation still lists cold smoking as a recognized method. At number 6, the trick is almost embarrassingly simple. A Polish grandmother named Wanda Krawczyk in Hamtramck, Michigan in 1939 made sausage every Saturday with nothing but a mixing bowl and her 2 hands. She combined ground pork with salt, pepper, garlic, and a pinch of marjoram. No casings, no grinder, no equipment. Mix 2 pounds of ground pork with 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon each of black pepper and garlic powder, and half a teaspoon of dried sage. Form into patties or press into logs wrapped in wax paper and refrigerate. Slice and cook within 5 days or freeze for 6 months. Salt inhibits microbial growth while drawing moisture to the surface, firming the texture and concentrating the flavor into something that tastes like it came from a butcher shop. Jimmy Dean sells a 1-pound roll of breakfast sausage for $5.29. 2 pounds of ground pork at Aldi costs $5.98 and makes the same product twice over. That is a 50% savings per pound. Number 5 is the one the USDA does not want you to find. Harlan McBride kept a salt box in his root cellar in Harlan County, Kentucky in 1936, and it held enough cured pork to feed his family from first frost to April. He rubbed fresh pork with coarse salt, brown sugar, and pink curing salt, weighted it down, and left it in a cold room for 6 weeks. Rub a pork shoulder or belly with a thick layer of kosher salt mixed with a tablespoon of brown sugar per pound. Set it on a rack in the coldest part of your refrigerator for 5 to 7 days, flipping daily. Rinse and hang in a cool, dry spot for 1 more week. Here is the part that makes this entry different from all the others. Salt drops water activity below 0.85, the threshold where virtually all dangerous bacteria stop growing. In 1978, the USDA discontinued its home meat curing bulletin after lobbying from the American Meat Institute, which called home curing an unacceptable risk. Hormel sells cured ham for $6 a pound. Curing a pork shoulder from the sale rack at $1.99 produces the same result at a third of the cost. For number 4, walk into any grocery store at 6 in the morning and look at the meat case. A butcher named Stanley Kuzma on the south side of Milwaukee taught every regular customer the same lesson in 1951. The sell-by date is not an expiration date. His wife Clara bought marked down beef at closing every Thursday and served it Friday night. The sell-by date tells the store when to rotate product for inventory. It has nothing to do with safety. Beef and pork stay safe 3 to 5 days past that date at 40 degrees or below. Smell it. If it smells clean and metallic, it is fine. If it smells sour, toss it. Your nose is more reliable than a printed label, and the USDA confirms this on their own website. Kroger, Walmart, and Safeway mark meat down 30 to 50% the morning before the sell-by date, usually between 6 and 8 a.m. A family hitting the markdown section weekly saves over $150 a year. The Food Marketing Institute estimates stores discard $21 billion in unsold meat annually, most of it still safe to eat. Stop and consider what the last section just revealed. Salt, smoke, your own sausage, a nose, and a clock. 5 pieces of knowledge that any farm wife in 1940 would have called common sense. Today, those 5 things represent billions of dollars in corporate revenue. Because if you knew them, you would stop buying the products built to replace them. Hormel's net revenue last year was $12.22 billion. Hillshire Farm is owned by Tyson, which posted $53 billion. Jimmy Dean is a Tyson brand too. One company owns the smoked meat aisle, the sausage case, and the frozen breakfast section. And all 3 depend on you never learning what Wanda, Harlan, and Eldon already knew. These final 3 secrets are the ones that stay with people the longest. And the last one is the reason I made this video. Most people have forgotten what number 3 even is. In a shotgun house in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in 1943, a woman named Odette Thibodeau bought 1 chicken a week and made it last 7 days. Sunday was roasted thighs and drumsticks. Monday, sliced breast for sandwiches. Tuesday, wings in a skillet with rice. Wednesday through Friday, the carcass simmered into soup. Saturday, she crumbled the scraps into cornbread dressing. 1 bird, 7 meals, 7 days of children who never went hungry. Us take the feet, the neck, the gizzards, everything the plastic tray is designed to make you throw away, and simmer them 4 hours with onion, celery, and salt. This is the one that makes people go quiet when they hear it. A whole chicken costs $6 to $8. Odette pulled 49 meals from 4 birds a month. About $32. That is 65 cents a meal for a family of 5. Purdue sells a rotisserie chicken for $7.99 and expects you to throw the carcass in the trash. Americans discard an estimated $3 billion in usable poultry parts every year. Save number 2 for a weekend, because once you understand it, you will not want to wait. Take any raw meat, beef, pork, chicken, cut it into 1-inch cubes and pack them into sterilized quart mason jars with a teaspoon of salt per jar. Leave 1 inch of head space. Wipe the rim, seat the lid and ring, and process in a pressure canner at 10 pounds of pressure for 90 minutes. The jars seal as they cool, and the meat stays shelf stable for 3 to 5 years at room temperature without electricity. Francis Kowalski kept 40 jars of canned beef and pork on a basement shelf in Springfield, Illinois in 1933. She never worried about a power outage or a broken freezer. Pressure and temperature together destroy every known pathogen, including botulinum spores. A water bath cannot reach the heat that meat requires. In 1978, the USDA Extension Service stopped printing its home meat canning guide. The Ball Corporation sells millions of jars a year, but has never funded a public campaign for meat canning. A quart jar of home canned beef costs roughly $3. A comparable jar from Keystone costs $11.49. This is number one, and it is the entry that made me write this script. Ruth Szymanski lived on the third floor of a row house in Baltimore, Maryland in 1941. Every night, the bones from dinner went into a pot on the back of her stove. Chicken carcasses, pork neck bones, beef knuckles, nothing left that kitchen in the trash. By morning, she had a thick golden broth that became the base for every soup, gravy, and pot of beans her family ate that week. Save every bone and trimming in a bag in your freezer. When the bag is full, put it all in your biggest pot with cold water, a splash of vinegar, 1 onion, and salt. Simmer 12 to 24 hours and strain. When it sets like jelly in the refrigerator, that is pure gelatin from the collagen. And that is how you know it worked. Swanson and Pacific Foods charge $6 to $9 a quart for bone broth. Your scraps produce 4 to 6 quarts for the cost of water. Ruth never called it bone broth. She called it stock. She never bought a can in her life. Because why would you pay for something your garbage makes for free? The American bone broth market hit $4.8 billion in 2024. Every dollar of it spent on a product your grandmother made from parts she would have been ashamed to throw away. Number 17 saves over $400 a year on steak. Number 15 turned your refrigerator into a dry aging room. And number 1 proved the most expensive broth on the shelf is made from scraps your grandmother never threw away. Tell me in the comments, what meat trick does your family still use from the old days? Next video covers 17 bread secrets, including one that turns a 5-cent ingredient into something bakeries charge $4 for. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Grandma knew. Now you do too.